There is no bigger mess right now than the UFC lightweight division, with everybody ducking each other, every contender begging for a title fight, and they do not deserve it, and the champion not wanting to fight the only guy that might even deserve it more than the others. We need to talk about lightweight. We need to talk about what's going on with this division, who wants to fight who is ducking who, and what we should be doing with the division. Now, the UFC has some other ideas. Dana White's made some implications on who should be next, what's going to be next for the champion, what's going to be next for each individual fighter. We have a lot to talk about with lightweight. I'm MMA DBM. This is my first YouTube video in a while. I'll be posting on every single day, 12 Eastern time, at least 10 minutes or longer for these videos. Hopefully you guys are going to be enjoying these YouTube videos overall. If you do, subscribe and follow me on TikTok, MMA_DBM. Let's get into this video. Topuria, by the way, is right now the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. In my opinion, deservingly so, an undefeated fighter at lightweight. And he is going to be fighting one of Arman Tsarukyan, Justin Gaethje, or maybe even Paddy Pimblett next, or at least that's what it seems like for his first ever defense at lightweight. Islam Makhachev is right now the #1 ranked guy at lightweight, even though he has moved up to welterweight to fight Jack Della Maddalena. Dana White has looked at that fight and had some conversations about Topuria versus Makhachev. We'll get into that in a moment. Let's go over the current contenders. Let's go over the guys that everybody's been talking about of who's going to get the next shot, who everybody thinks is going to get the next shot. Arman Tsarukyan, Justin Gaethje, and Paddy Pimblett. Paddy Pimblett is coming off of a win. This one should be completely denounced. He came into the cage because Joe Rogan is I don't know what Joe Rogan was doing. I don't know why Joe Rogan decided to bring Paddy Pimblett into the cage, why he told Paddy Pimblett to come in, why he let the security let him in. I don't know why the UFC didn't say anything to Joe Rogan. I don't know why the UFC didn't tell anybody that, look, we're not going to have anybody walk into the cage if Topuria wins or if Charles wins. It doesn't make any sense. And Paddy Pimblett walked in. Dana White was furious with that. Paddy Pimblett is coming off of a Michael Chandler win. Michael Chandler won, one fight in his last 5 going into the Paddy Pimblett fight. He had a 2 straight fight losing streak against Dustin Poirier, getting submitted and losing decisively and dominantly to Charles Oliveira across their second fight. Michael Chandler should not be the pedestal for Paddy Pimblett to get a title shot in 2025 after Michael Chandler was already on a 2-fight losing streak. So Paddy Pimblett getting a shot, let alone getting in that cage with Topuria, is the dumbest thing the UFC has ever done merit-wise. I understand the sell. I understand how big of a fight that would be in terms of money for the UFC, in terms of production for the UFC, in terms of being able to produce a certain amount of viewership, a certain amount of social media viewership. A build-up of that fight is going to be much more interesting than any of these ones. Understandably so. But give Paddy some sort of merit. Make it seem some sort of credible way. When the UFC screws other people over for title shots, they usually give somebody an undeserved fight before a title shot, and then they get into the title shot. Sean O'Malley got an undeserved undeserved fight against Peter Yan after that Pedro Munoz fight, right? At the bare minimum, Sean O'Malley had a couple. I think Raulian Paiva was ranked number 15. And then he ended up fighting, I think, Pedro Munoz. I don't know if there was a fight in between then or not, if I'm not remembering it correctly, but I know Sean O'Malley had at least one ranked fight, and then he ends up fighting a guy at the absolute top of the division, a former champion, who is actually doing well in his fights, who was actually competing at the time in Peter Yan. And Sean O'Malley, in my opinion, lost that fight, but Peter Yan was a guy that was respectable enough where if you get a win over Peter Yan, you end up fighting for the title. That's why O'Malley fought for the title. Paddy Pimblett has not done that yet. Paddy Pimblett has not beaten anybody somewhat respectable in a deserved or undeserved fight for him. He should be fighting one more fight at the bare minimum at a decent caliber, and that's why the UFC are trying to push the Justin Gaethje fight, where Gaethje's not a grappler. He can't grapple to save his life. If you look through Gaethje's recent performances, his recent fights, honestly his fights throughout the UFC, any predominant grappler he faces, he's going to lose to. He lost to Charles Oliveira. He lost to Khabib Nurmagomedov. Got finished by both of them. Submitted by both of them. Very, very early. Round 1 and round 2. Respectively, Oliveira and Khabib. But Justin Gaethje doesn't fight grapplers for the most part. He likes to fight strikers. He doesn't want to fight Paddy Pimblett. He said he's not going to be the UFC stepping stone. So, in my opinion, Paddy doesn't even deserve the Gaethje fight. I agree with Gaethje on this. Gaethje does not deserve to fight down to Paddy right now. I think Gaethje should be fighting Arman Tsarukyan. I don't think Gaethje's going to fight Arman Tsarukyan. I think he's afraid to fight Arman Tsarukyan. I don't think he wants to fight a true #1 contender's bout. He wants to fight for the title now or leave. He said that he would fight for the title or an insane amount of money. The insane amount of money was a bluff because he's completely gone away from that, and now he's saying that he will only fight against against Topuria for the title. Otherwise, he's not fighting. He's completely gone back on that part of him saying or a certain amount of money. Gaethje does not want to fight. He doesn't want to fight. He wants a title shot. He wants a chance at the title. He gets knocked out by Topuria, moves on, retires. He's done. 36 years old or something like that, Gaethje is. He wants out. Now, Paddy Pimblett, in my opinion, should be fighting Beneil Dariush. Beneil Dariush is ranked above Paddy Pimblett. Beneil Dariush just won against Renato Moicano. He can grapple. He grappled against Moicano pretty well overall. Paddy Pimblett can hurt Dariush on the feet. Paddy Pimblett could possibly grapple Beneil Dariush. We haven't really seen anybody dominantly grapple Dariush ever. Really, ever, that we have seen. And if Paddy Pimblett could do that, although Dariush is older, Dariush it looks a little slow on the feet. If Moicano's hurting you on the feet, it's going to be a little bit of a concern. I want to see how that fight goes. I want to see that fight. I think it's a good fight for the UFC to put Paddy against a vet who has won, who has faced top-level competition, who just beat Renato Moicano in a really good grappling performance. Oh, can Paddy Pimblett grapple? And that's some way the UFC can salvage the buildup of a Dariush versus Paddy fight. I don't think Paddy deserves to fight Hooker. I think Hooker deserves a better fight. I think Gamrot deserves a better fight, but I think Gamrot-Fiziev is going to happen. Or maybe even Gamrot-Dariush might happen, which would be stupid. I think they're actually talking about that. Then that means Paddy versus Gaethje is probably actually going to happen. Dan Hooker now. Why I don't think Dan Hooker deserves to fight Paddy is because Dan Hooker's on a pretty good win streak. He just beat Mateusz Gamrot. I don't really see how Dan Hooker should be fighting lower. He was booked against Gaethje. Why give him a lower fight to fight Paddy? No, it makes no sense. I think Dan Hooker should be fighting either Charles Oliveira or Justin Gaethje. But Dan Hooker's calling out Arman Tsarukyan. Arman Tsarukyan and Dan Hooker have had a load of beef. It's lightweight division's it's out of sorts, man. It's losing its mind because everybody wants to fight somebody and then they duck everybody else, right? And that person that they want to fight doesn't want to fight them. And now it just seems like we finally have a fight where one fighter actually wants to fight the other. Arman Tsarukyan doesn't like Dan Hooker, and maybe he'd want to beat him, to be honest. And Dan Hooker actually wants to fight Arman. He's saying everybody else in lightweight is ducking Arman Tsarukyan because they know he's the best fighter outside the champion right now in lightweight. No one wants to fight him. Let me fight him. Hooker is calling out Arman Tsarukyan relentlessly. That's a sick fight. If that fight were to happen, I think Oliveira Holloway is happening. Holloway is definitely a guy you can consider up next. Dana White, honestly, the only person he's ever talked about being in a good position to be fighting for the title next is Holloway. He dismissed Justin Gaethje saying, retire if you're going to say you should retire or fight for a title. He said at that point, if you're thinking about retirement, go retire. For Tsarukyan, he said making weight as the backup is a good step in the right position. In the right direction, rather, but it's not necessarily something that's going to give him the next shot. He does not deserve the next shot. Tsarukyan needs to fight. Paddy Pimblett, same thing. He dismissed it by saying Paddy should have never been in the cage with Topuria, that it was a horrible mishandling and it should have never happened. And if he was out there, it would not have happened. But Max Holloway is kind of giving praise too. Obviously, moments are a big part of the sport, and Max Holloway just had a gigantic moment over Dustin Poirier in a sick fight, and Dustin Poirier's retirement fight, spoiling it, still the BMF champion, even though Topuria knocked him out. We can talk about that later. Anyways, yeah, like, I think if Hooker is fighting Tsarukyan, we have Oliveira Holloway, I don't know what Gaethje's going to have to do. Gaethje's going to have to fight Paddy Pimblett. And I think that Dariush Gamrot fight's actually going to happen. Lord knows what happens from there. I think Fiziev deserves a fight up. I don't know what they're going to do with Fiziev. It's such a weird situation with the UFC right now that they have in lightweight because they need to be very particular with how they book this. The way I think they should book it, really, really should book it, is Max Holloway versus Arman Tsarukyan. They do Charles Oliveira versus Dan Hooker. I think they do Justin Gaethje versus Paddy Pimblett. Although I don't think Gaethje deserves to be fighting that low. I think Gaethje deserves to be fighting higher. But his last two wins are Rafael Fiziev. He got knocked out by Max Holloway prior to that. He's already lost 2 title fights and been finished in both of those. Has he redeemed himself much outside of that? Dustin Poirier knockout pretty good. The Fiziev win's pretty decent overall. I don't know. With Max knocking him out, does Max deserve a worse fight than Gaethje? No, in my opinion. I think Max knocking out Gaethje and doing that to Poirier pretty good overall. Although Gaethje did knock out Poirier, Max knocked out Gaethje. Gaethje saying he did the UFC a favor. Well, at this point, Max Holloway is now number 4 ranked above him in lightweight. Can you really put Justin Gaethje doing that as a favor for the UFC? No, I don't think so. It's weird, man. It's weird. Like, every time I try to book this division, you start going through it and you see, like, oh, what if I do this and this guy's getting a fight that he should probably be getting a better fight. Fiziev should be fighting up. Dariush should probably be fighting up. I think the guys that have lost recently in the division should be defending their spot. The problem is Tsarukyan's on a win and he's on a large win streak and he's at number 2. Holloway is on a good win streak right now after the Topuria knockout. Apart from the Topuria knockout, I mean, he has a knockout over Gaethje. He just beat Poirier, kicked him out of, not just out of the rankings. I mean, Poirier retired, but Poirier was like top 6 or 7 at the time that he beat him. Yeah, I don't understand exactly the position the UFC's gotten themselves into at lightweight is very weird. It sucks for them, honestly, because it's a very difficult one to manage, to book. Joel Alvarez, I don't understand why he's still ranked. I think he declared that he's going to welterweight, so I don't know why he's even in the rankings at all. But same thing with Makhachev. Makhachev's a welterweight too. But anyways, I think the UFC might be waiting for Topuria Makhachev. I think Dana White has been talking about it. I think Dana White literally said if Makhachev beats JDM, which I think JDM could definitely spoil, but if Makhachev beats JDM, you do the super fight between him and Topuria. And I agree. I think you can make them wait depending on how long you have to make Makhachev-Topuria wait. Like, Topuria would have fought in July. Makhachev would have to be fighting in November. That's another 4 months already from Topuria fighting in July. Or no, end of June. Topuria fought end of June. And Makhachev would be fighting, I don't know when the MSG card would be, probably mid-end of June, of November. So, end of June, end of November, that's 5 months of Topuria sitting out, not fighting, waiting for the MSG card between Makhachev and JDM, and then let's say Makhachev wins. How much longer is Makhachev going to want to wait to fight Topuria? Is it going to be at 155? If it is, it's probably going to need a lot more time for Makhachev to wait to fight Topuria. If it's not at 155 and it's at 170, how long does it need? Is it going to be a shorter amount of time? I don't know. The weight cuts are different. Obviously, Topuria barely even has to cut at all to make 170. I think it'd be a bad decision for Topuria too. But if it were up to me, and I were to make these fights, I were to book lightweight right now, what should happen as opposed to what will happen is Ilia Topuria should be fighting Arman Tsarukyan. And I'm not saying Arman Tsarukyan deserves a title shot. He deserved it. He earned it. And then he blew it. After you blow an opportunity that you earned, you are no longer given that opportunity for the most part. In anything in life, let alone sports. I mean, literally people are winning. People are trying to take your opportunity. If Max Holloway gets another win before Arman Tsarukyan fights again, then what happens then, right? Yeah, I think we do Tsarukyan versus Topuria. You do Oliveira versus who? I think you do Paddy versus Oliveira. I think Oliveira has to defend his spot. He's lost, I believe, if I'm not wrong, 2 of his last 3, or was it? I don't know. He's 1-1 in his last 2. Prior to entering, yeah, so he's lost 2 of his last 3 going into the after the Topuria fight. Defend your spot. Paddy Pimblett versus Charles Oliveira should be the fight to make. Max Holloway's in a position, isn't he, at that point? Yes. It's a hard division to book. Maybe you do Holloway versus Oliveira. You do Tsarukyan versus Topuria. You do Holloway versus Oliveira. Gaethje versus Hooker, maybe you rebook. It's like one of those like 2, 3, 4, 5. It's such a weird division. You champ 2. Even though Tsarukyan should be 1, but you know what I mean? Oliveira, Holloway. It's such a weird situation right now because Holloway deserves a better fight than anybody below him. He deserves the Oliveira fight. Oliveira should be defending his spot, though. Shouldn't be defending it towards the top. Should be defending it against the guy who's on a win streak from lower end, like Paddy, for example. Especially considering both of their last wins are Michael Chandler. I think it's a fight you literally have hand in hand to be made. It's so weird. It's such a weird division, and I've never had difficulty of trying to book a division. I can't wait to see what the UFC does, and I'm certain that no matter what the UFC does, it's going to be horrific, because Dan Hooker himself said it looks like that Topuria is fighting Gaethje. If Dan Hooker's saying that, I'm really hoping it's not of anything substance, but assuming it's going to be of substance, let's see Gaethje gets a title shot against Topuria. Topuria fights Gaethje. Now you have Tsarukyan, Oliveira, Holloway, Gamrot, and Hooker all available. Holloway called out Oliveira. That's the most likely shot after. Then you're going to do Hooker versus Tsarukyan. That's exactly what Hooker's basically putting out there. I think Fiziev versus Gamrot makes more sense. I think you do Paddy versus Dariush at that point. I think if that happens, fine. You do Tsarukyan, Hooker. You do Oliveira, Holloway. You do Gamrot. You can either do Gamrot, Dariush too, and do Fiziev, Paddy. But I think it makes more sense to do Paddy, Dariush, and Fiziev, Gamrot too, because that fight ended in an injury, and you go from there. That makes more sense at the top of lightweight. As for the guys at the bottom, I mean, Benoit Saint-Denis probably fighting Mauricio Rufi at the co-main event, in my opinion, at UFC Paris. Behind Imavov and Bahalia, which is Frenchman versus Fight Nerd, and then co-main Frenchman versus Fighting Nerd. As the main and co-main for UFC Paris, which is a pretty sick overall event. Chandler, Lord knows who Chandler's going to be fighting. Maybe that's also the Rufi fight. Moicano versus Chandler could also be happening, so maybe that happens. But then again, Grant Dawson deserves a higher end fight where he was fighting Joel Alvarez. Alvarez is not going up to welterweight. It's such a mess at lightweight right now where we don't have a guy other than Arman Tsarukyan, in my opinion, that we really think can beat the champion. If you think Holloway can beat Topuria, out of your mind. Paddy Pimblett can't beat him. There's literally nobody in lightweight that can beat the champion, that can compete with the champion, other than Makhachev, who's gone, and Tsarukyan, where I've seen Tsarukyan get clipped by much worse overall competition. I'm just yapping at this point right now because it's a weird division to book. If Gaethje's getting the title shot, as Dan Hooker said, you do Topuria Gaethje, you do Tsarukyan versus Hooker, you do Oliveira versus Holloway. But then you leave yourself in a position where if Tsarukyan beats Hooker and Holloway beats Oliveira, who's next for the shot? Are you doing the Holloway fight? Are you screwing Tsarukyan again? Or is Tsarukyan getting the shot, and is Holloway going to wait? How long till Holloway fights? How long till Tsarukyan fights? When is Tsarukyan going to fight Hooker? When is Oliveira going to fight Holloway, if that happens? I can't wait to see it. I think the right fights to make are Tsarukyan, Topuria, and then you go Oliveira, Holloway. Gaethje's going to have to take a step down to fight Hooker. You do Gamrot versus Fiziev. You do Paddy versus Dariush. That's probably the best way to book it without making it too crazy, and probably makes the most sense overall for what we have. Tsarukyan's the most deserving out of anybody here, even though he has been a brat. He has been waiting on, not taking fights, declining fights against other contenders that he definitely would be getting a Topuria shot immediately had he just taken one of those shots. Nobody's sabotaging Arman Tsarukyan more than Arman Tsarukyan himself. We'll see what ends up happening. I have a big feeling they're going to wait for Topuria Makhachev, and they're going to just try to lay out this division with contender fights and see what happens from there. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and follow MMA_DBM on TikTok. I'm live every single day on there. I have a new schedule posted out in my Discord. I think the Discord link is in the description if you guys want to join. In the announcements, I have my live schedule. I'll hopefully put it in like a separate section. Live every single day. I do watch-alongs during pay-per-views on those live streams. I post like 4 to 6 different videos on that, and I'll be posting on YouTube every single day. So please, if you guys are not already subscribed, you're not already following, click that subscribe button and click that follow button on TikTok. I will see you guys tomorrow, 12 p.m. And again, every single day, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Pacific Time, and what's it called? What's UK time? 5 p.m. UK time. You will have a YouTube video on this channel from me. And on Saturdays, it will be post-fight. So no 12 p.m. video on Saturdays. It will be a post-fight video recapping the fights of that day. Thank you guys all for watching. I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.